at Swarthmore, which is like, I think a little bit better than that school down the street. Haverford, do you know that school, Haverford? Swarthmore, he was the Division III Pitcher of the Year. He doesn't like me to talk about him, but and he also won, I can't remember the name of it, the Topps Ultimate Scout. So he gets his own baseball card. You get to write a card?
Yeah, I get to, so Casey Mize, the first overall pick in the draft, I get to write the back of his baseball card. And Topps is flying me out to the Arizona Fall League to be a scout for the All-Star game that happened in November.
So Ricky is going to talk to us a little bit about, number one, sports analytics and things that are interesting to him and why he's doing what he does.
So the purpose of this talk is I want to get everybody in state of mind so they can understand why we have sports analytics and how sports analytics work in general, obviously with, leaning towards baseball, just because that's my expertise. So if we go, hold on. Okay, so analytics, the systematic computational analysis of data and statistics, right? So that's the formal definition. What that basically means is taking large amounts of data, large amounts of stats that comes in a variety of ways, usually in R, usually in Excel sheets, and having it undergo certain mathematical processes so we can better understand it, right? So that's a lot of fancy language. So what does it mean in English? What are the numbers trying to tell us? We need to think of it as kind of like a story, right? The numbers are trying to tell us a certain story, and we're trying to understand and listen to that story. So, why do we need it? So, for two very specific reasons. The first one is fake news, and the second one is decision making. So, with fake news, what I mean is, with fake news, what I mean is that the information that is being presented it is like technically factually correct, but it's not telling the right story. It's kind of misleading, and it's not like really reflective of what the actual truth is. And then with decision making, it's things like shifts, like how can we use analytics to figure out where a guy's more likely to hit a ball, and then we put it there. How can we figure out which hitter is going to struggle against certain pitches, and how can we utilize that information to our advantage? So in this very horrible fake news example, we have Babe Ruth compared to Bartolo Colon, and Mike Trout compared to Bartolo Colon, right? So, Babe Ruth, 94 career wins, Bartolo Colon 247. Babe Ruth has struck out over 1,000 times, while Bartolo Colon has struck out under 200, and so on and so forth. So technically, everything on here is correct, right? And if you didn't know anything about baseball, and you presented it this way, you would say, wow, this Bartolo guy's pretty good, right? But as you know, what?
He is.
I mean, he is, but he's not Ruth or Trout. So this is kind of what I mean by fake news. So where analytics comes into play is what happens when we have examples that are less obvious. So, for instance, here, Bartolo Colon has 247 wins in his career. Kershaw has 150 at the time that this was created. And then Bartolo Colon also has more strikeouts in the entirety of his career. So we all know that Kershaw, at his best, not in the playoffs, in the regular season, is better than Bartolo Colon, right? We all know that. But when it's presented in this kind of way, it's kind of like, oh, it makes the argument harder, right? So we need analytics to kind of solve this. So basically, the numbers are misleading. Which stories are accurate and which ones are fake news? Again, just kind of hammering that point. So the two ways that we can try to combat fake news is when you think about rates and when you think about value. So you can go ahead. So how often does a player create a good or a bad event, right? Because when you look at Bartolo, and it's kind of dark here, I apologize for that, but if you look at his 162 game averages, his ERA is 4.12, he's thrown 211 innings, and he gives up 27 home runs for 162 games. And then when you look at Kershaw, even though he's played 10 less years, he has a 2.39 ERA, he throws more innings, and he gives up less home runs, right? And so if we were to go back to the slide where we compared Bartolo Colon's and Kershaw's number of strikeouts, again, trying to tell the right story, we see that Kershaw, on the average, So over the course of 162 games, so full season, 33 starts, Chris has 90 more strikeouts, right? So again, how often does a good event happen, and how often does a bad event happen? So thinking about rates. And so another example is Whit Merrifield and Ichiro. So Ichiro, going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. Ichiro averaged 189 hits over the course of 162 games. And so is Whit Merrifield so far. And Whit Merrifield has averaged 37 stolen bases over 162 games. And Ichiro only averaged 31. So when we look at rates and we look at career rates and we're trying to, determine which players are better than others, a big problem that we have in the industry is that some players play too long, right? Like you've played too many years past your prime, and you're kind of ruining your career numbers. So when we present information like this, it's like, oh, Whit Merrifield is starting to look like Ichiro. Well, maybe not. When we look at the total number of hits that Ichiro had with more than 200 in a season, he had 10. That is a ton. And then when we look at how many more stolen bases he had, how many more seasons he had, where he had 30 more stolen bases, Ichiro also had 10, but Whit Merrifield's only had 2. Ton, a huge difference, right? So we need to think about how good were their rates during their prime, and did they play too long past their prime and ruin their career rates, right? So rates aren't complete, right? It's just something to think about. And so now we need to talk, I'm going to talk about think about value. If I were to say a player hit 40 home runs and had 130 RBIs, that seems great, right? But the thing that we need to think about is how much are we getting and how much are we losing? So nowadays a player like that probably strikes out a lot. So are the heavy amounts of strikeouts worth all the home runs and all the RBIs and things like that? Those are things that we've recently started looking at players in terms of not their counting stats. Counting means you just add up how many they had. So like home runs, RBIs, runs, those are all counting stats. Trying to decipher between those things. So we look at Trout. In 2013, Trout had 27 home runs, 97 RBIs. Davis had 53 home runs, 138 RBIs. Davis also had more stolen bases. More total bases. So when you look at just that information, it seems almost pretty clear that Davis just had a better season. But we have really, really, really advanced metrics that are kind of outside the scope of this presentation that we should calculate. So everybody here's heard of WAR, right? So WAR is offensive WAR plus defensive WAR plus base running WAR. So it's kind of just the sum of.
So those folks watching at home, what does WAR stand for?
It stands for wins above replacement. So
wins above replacement.
Wins above replacement. So replacement is just literally a random minor league player that you pull up, right? So somebody that's in everybody's system. So you just pull them up and however he plays, he plays. So we're trying to figure out if this person is bringing any benefit, right? So when you look at the home runs and the RBIs and total bases, again, seems like Davis had a way better 2013 season. But when we use advanced metrics to calculate batting runs, so that's how many runs were actually generated through the player being in the lineup. Mike Trout had more, and Mike Trout had almost double the amount of offensive WAR. So even though when you look at those three statistics in particular, Mike Trout seems inferior to Davis. The reality is that Chris Davis strikes out so much that it actually offsets the amount of offensive WAR that he has. Did you have questions? No? Okay. Okay, so the fun part, right? Finding new statistics, right? So let's look at some of the older ones that you usually use. Slugging, right? So it's really simple. Number of singles plus 2 times double plus 3 times number of triples plus 4 times number of runs divided by at-bats. So what this basically says is how many bases are you getting per at-bat. So kind of like a rate in that sense, value divided by a rate, right? Does anybody see a problem with this? Like the most obvious problem is slugging?
Aren't home runs more common than triples?
Yes, but with respect to slugging percentage, is there anything that's obviously wrong with the way that this is calculated?
It doesn't count for like walks or damage or errors or.
True, it's a little incomplete, right? So this is fun, sorry. If you can go back one. So the big thing here that we started noticing is that because we have these coefficients in front of each of the types of hitting outcomes, what the coefficients are literally implying is that a double is worth 2 times the amount of a single, a triple is worth 3 times the amount, and a home run is worth 4 times the amount, which is like very untrue. A double is marginally better than a single. It's not twice the value of the single, or else anybody that hit a ton of home runs, like that'd be the be-all, end-all of baseball statistics. So that's a big problem. So what we do is we use really complicated linear algebra to actually create more accurate weights for the coefficients for all of the different types of outcomes. So what they do is they take, so this is non-intentional walks, hit by pitches, single, double, triple, home run. And what they do is they line all of those up and they take the amount of those outcomes that a given team had and they set them equal to the total number of runs scored. And they do that for all 30 teams. And then they use linear algebra to simplify the matrix. And in English, what that basically means is that we have a literal run value for every single type of outcome. Right? So, you know, this saying like a walk is as good as a hit, that is actually untrue. So a non-intentional walk is only worth 0.72 runs, according to linear algebra, and a single is worth 0.9 runs, right? And so this is really different from slugging percentage because, again, we have all of those other types of events. And when you look at doubles, so we have 1.24 runs is how much a double is worth. That is not double what the single is worth in the slugging percentage equation.
What is RPOE sample?
Yeah, reach base on there. So that's for hitting. And so another example.
Ricky, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is that per team or is that across the league? How is that calculated?
So it is calculated across very different ways. So there is an all-time one,
Okay.
and then but that can be misleading because baseball has changed so much, especially the way people hit.
Yeah.
And so what they're starting to do is they're just starting to be more recent and recent. So we'll create the weights for this year, or we'll equate the weights that are the average of the past 3 years. They'll do it by league because the American League has a DH, so there are more runs, things like that. But that's a good question. Yeah. So for pitching, the usual one is earned run average, right? How many earned runs do you give up per inning? Multiply by that. Really simple. A guy by the name of Voros McCracken, about a decade ago, did a lot of really intensive research that actually showed that the number of hits, the number of batted balls that fall for hits for a given pitcher don't hold up from year to year, right? So how many hits you give up is very, very volatile and very inconsistent. And what that means in simpler terms is that hits are not very indicative at the major league level. Hits aren't very indicative of ability, right? So we have fielding independent pitching, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? So we take the fielders off the field and imagine that hitting, like hits in and of themselves, are not a part of earned run average. So the only things that a pitcher can control are home runs. So yes, a home run is a hit, but if you give up an absolute tank, maybe you're not a very good pitcher, right? Walks, hit by pitches, totally in your control. Strikeouts, also totally in your control. So kind of isolating the things that you literally can control as a pitcher, with the idea being that once the ball is put into play, you have no control over anything. So innings pitched, again, just dividing by opportunities, trying to put that into a rate. And the fifth constant, it's the same for every single pitcher, and basically why we add the fifth constant is to scale it up to ERA. So when we actually calculate this number, what happens is the number ends up being way too small. So like a horrendous pitcher will have a fifth in like the high 2s, which makes them seem really good if we want to compare it to ERA. So we add a fifth constant to scale it up, and the fifth constant is based on the average fifth across the league in a given year. So that's fielding independent pitching. So what I'm doing right now is I'm working on 2 research projects. The first one, I'm using minor league data to model and predict major league weighted on-base average. So basically, weighted on-base average is kind of like what we talked about earlier, just trying to find better weights and things like that. So what I'm doing is I'm taking all major league hitters that have substantial minor league data and have weighted on-base averages above 340, because according to Fangraphs, which is a really popular baseball website, having a weighted on-base average above 340 qualifies you as being good. Like you're above average, really good hitter. And I'm taking the minor league data for all of those players, and I'm playing that into R and using analysis to try to create a model that basically puts a value on strikeout rates, walk rates, and things like that. And so the idea is that I put current minor leaguers and I take their stats and I put them into that model, and it's going to spit out a predicted major league weighted on-base average. And so somebody is actually already trying to do this on Fangraphs. You may have seen it before through Fangraphs law. It's called Cato, so K-A-T-O-H. It's named after Kosuke Kato, a minor league prospect from that ended up failing back on the club or something. And what the inventor of Cato tries to do is he's created his own model, and he predicts like this minor league player is going to have a good year, or this minor league player is going to have a bad year. And so every year he compiles his top 100 prospect list, and at the end of the year, he says, here are the players that I was right about, and here are the players that I was wrong about. What I'm trying to do with this first piece of research is I'm trying to beat that. So try to get more players right and less players wrong, obviously. Because if that's the case, then I have a better model for predicting weighted on-base averages for my leaguers. And then the second one, it's a little more complicated. I'm doing it with a professor. We're looking at peak WAR and career WAR to better classify Hall of Famers. So a problem that we have in baseball is that back then, because of injuries and military time, a lot of players didn't play as long as they do today. So guys like Koufax were like, so with Koufax, he was like amazing, but he didn't play that long. So that's kind of a problem, because when we look at WAR, his WAR isn't as high over the career as a guy like Mike Messina, because Mike Messina played forever. So that's kind of a problem we have when we're trying to figure out, is this person Hall of Fame worthy? And so I'm just, it's a little complicated, but I'm working on a project right now with the professor to try to reconcile that. So we just are a lot better at picking, who are Hall of Famers and who aren't. So that's it. Hope you guys learned a lot. I want to open the floor to questions, because I know there's a lot of information at one time. So if you have any questions, feel free.
So how do you apply like these stats to like your current playing career, like at Fort North? Or do you?
Yeah. So we are very fortunate to have spray charts for the other teams. We kind of deal with some other coaches where we give them the spray charts that we have for the teams that we play, and they give us the team that they play. And so we're pretty heavily involved into the shifts. Shift a lot. Another thing that we have that's just in analytics in general, not anything that I talked about here, is we have Rapsodo, which is it's kind of like StatCast, where it tells us for any given pitch, the spin axis, the location, velocity, spin rate, spin efficiency, horizontal and vertical movement, things like that. And we've been able to do a lot of pitch design and pitch modeling with that. And I mean, it helped me. So what we learned about me is that my four seam was really, really, really flat, especially when I lifted up. And that's why, like, my sophomore year, I wasn't very good. And then what we learned is that my two seam gets a significant amount of fading action, running and fading action. So I started throwing that more through like Rapsodo and looking at those numbers and things like that.
Has anyone done the peak war before, or are you going to do it first?
It's definitely been done before. So it's called JAWS. It's JAWS by a man named Jay Jaffe. And again, he has a system where he tries to reconcile it, and we're just trying to be a little more accurate than him. But as of right now, he's kind of has the best. So
when you're starting like a big research project with like actual players and stats, like where do you? Because there's like a bunch of numbers in there that you probably couldn't find on like a box score or like anything like that. So are you like at the games recording your own data? Like where do you get it from?
I wish. So there's a website called Baseball Savants. Brooks Baseball has PitchFX data, which is all the Rapsodo data that I talked about, but for major league pitches. So if you ever wanted to look at like any pitch data ever, that is totally publicly available through Brooks Baseball. Fangraphs has a lot. The nice thing about Fangraphs is that it's also very editable. So you can import data, you can customize it, so you have certain stats and things like that. Tons of spray charts, both on those websites, publicly available. Yeah, a lot of it, fortunately more, because it's getting more popular, more and more of it is becoming publicly available, because there's not a lot of use in hiding it, because to be completely honest, the best researchers are the ones that don't work for major league teams. So, yeah.
How do you use spray charts to get the ships and do stuff like that?
I mean, it's pretty simple. So we divide the zone, we divide the field into zones, and we create heat maps. And so basically, heat maps represent frequency. So the ball, so for a given hitter, the ball was hit into this zone at a higher probability than all of the other zones. So when we look at the heat map, that zone is going to be really, really red. So we know to put a player there.
There are like a bunch of variables that like are involved that like in terms of like pitches, like a left-handed pitcher, right-handed pitcher, velocity. Is that taken into account as well?
That's a good question. So that is a limitation that we do have. So we do the best we can, just because there isn't as much data isn't collected at the collegiate level as frequently it is at the major league level. At the major league level, they've almost perfected that. Like guys, I don't know if you guys watched the Red Sox and the Dodgers game yesterday, but Alex Bregman hit a shot, ground ball, really hard ground ball, 90 plus exit velo right in the middle, and Correa was right there. Right, so it was a clutch situation, like in the 7th inning or something like that. So at the major level, they've almost perfected it, but we just don't have as much data as they do. So it is a limitation that we do have.
I was going to say heat maps are big in a basketball analytic. Where are points scored from, where are they not scored from?
For sure.
Which is why everybody's shooting threes and layups and no long twos. So that's, heat maps a big thing in
Yeah,
basketball.
for sure. And even in, it's even big in defense for like outfielders, because some outfielders are better at running backwards to the left, backwards to the right, forward to the left, to the right. And so we also have heat maps for different directions for some outfielders, so we can position them better. By we, I mean like major league teams, not at the collegiate level.
How many like research positions are available on like
So some teams are better than others, right? So I just spoke with the director of analytics of the Orioles, and they're kind of just starting to get on that train. So they only have like 3 or 4. But then if you look at the Astros, they have like probably like 15. The Rays have like 15. A lot of the smaller market teams, they need it because they need that edge. So they have like up to 15. And a lot of them are really, really smart stat, math, computer science, engineering majors that have really, really strong backgrounds and things like that. So,
Do you ultimately want to end up working for any of your teams?
personally, 100%. So, yes.
The Nats could use an advantage.
Yeah, they're going to lose the best player. Sorry. Any other questions? Yeah. So Cato's model, I don't have a percentage. I mean, he fully admits when he's wrong about certain people, but it's mostly accurate. He tends to be more accurate with middle to below type of players. And so what I mean by that is like, this player isn't very good, and I'm going to predict that he will continue to not be very good. He's right about that very often. So you're not like surprised, you know, like a surprise prospect. But he tends to be very wrong with the top guys. So he has Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as not panning out entirely. He has him being as like an average to slightly above average player, which I disagree with. But and his #1 player in 2017 was Dylan Cozens of the Phillies, who ended up being absolutely horrible. So he got his first person he got wrong. But again, outside of the top 10, he's usually very correct.
Like, how long has he been doing those?
I think he started in 2013, so it's kind of a recent thing.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say, like, would you, if you were to make something like that, would you like go back and see how right you were and how wrong you were about
Yeah, so what I'm doing in particular is I'm kind of cheating. I know I'm using 2017 because it already happened, obviously. So I know which players panned out and which ones didn't, but I'm pretending like I don't know, and then trying to predict, and then compare.
I had a question that might truly affect this group here. You may know this, I think you do know this, that we're working to get Emmanuel Burris, we're trying to find data to get Emmanuel Burris into the College Baseball Hall of Fame. And I know that you may have done a little bit of data gathering and stumping, but are there any, like I know we've got some ideas here, and some of our ideas were very similar to the Puig data, you know, where we present sort of like slanted news, which, you know, we're high school kids, so we can sometimes get away with that. But do you have any advice on like what type of data we should be gathering? We've actually got most of the College Baseball Hall of Fame, the position players. We're filling in the data. It's hard to find some of it. But is there an area that we should start looking at? And what would be your recommendation? I know you've been working on this data on your own.
It's the National Collegiate Baseball Hall of Fame, not the NCAA baseball.
Okay, so that's significantly different.
Exactly. So the one thing that I've noticed with all the people that are currently in the Hall of Fame is that when you go through and you read like why they were inducted, all of it is based on NCAA information. Right. So Emmanuel Burris was excellent in the Cape Cod. So I think that could be a pretty big advantage if you're going to present about him, because he has a couple of different awards, was an all-star, and things like that. Won like the Hustle Award for like hardest working player in the Cape. And the Cape is actually a big deal. So if you don't know about the Cape's a huge deal. Like I'm not good. Like I had all the awards and stuff. I am nowhere near good enough to play in the Cape. You got to be. Everyone that goes to the Cape's drafted. So, and then just in general, stolen bases. He was really fast. If you go to Fangraphs and you go to their library, there are more advanced metrics on stolen bases, like weighted stolen bases plus stolen base runs and things like that. A lot of those are used to count running more. So that's kind of where I would start.
Okay, so you got this down. So like we're gonna look at the Cape Cod League, and you've already been doing it. Sorry, you're way ahead of me. Okay. All right. Well, we want to say thank you for coming. I mean, I don't want to cut anybody off. Questions? More questions? I want to thank Mr. Conti for coming. Thank you, Ricky. Appreciate your time, and look forward to working with you. Hopefully, we can send you some data and you can analyze it and say, oh, this is trash, or this is awesome, that kind of thing. So, thanks very much. So I record.